Welcome along to the DDI Podcast, where our mission is simple. We're here to demystify the misconceptions surrounding the digital infrastructure sector. I'm Mark Yields, the Vice President for Schneider Electric's Secure Power Division here in the UK and Ireland. And today I'm delighted to welcome as my guest for this episode, Dame Dawn Childs, CEO of Pure Data Centres Group, a digital infrastructure organisation who support local communities, create employment opportunities, and believe in data centres for good. Welcome to the DDI Podcast, Dawn.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Well, good to have you. Look, let's get straight into this. I love to hear stories about, we've got so many diverse individuals in our industry. And I love to hear how people landed, because a lot of people do land in this industry. And maybe you have a nice story for us about how you landed in this industry, huh?
I don't know if it's nice, but it's definitely a story. So my background is mainly aviation, 20 odd years in the Air Force, followed by Gatwick Airport as their head of engineering, then theme parks, so roller coasters, great things like that. I then was at National Grid for a couple of years, leading transformation, and I got a call from a sort of pseudo scale-up data centre company going, we think you've got just the background to set up our operation. And I hadn't even heard of data centres. So I sort of had a little bit of a research, bit of a think through it. And then I thought, you know what? Actually, this is a pretty good industry. It's growing and this could be amazing. So I jumped in.
You jumped. I like that. And when you think about how that kind of transition and the speed of that transition took place, was there much research done, or did you just do a skim read, or how deep did you go into the data center industry?
I went fairly deep from what I could find. I read certain books that are out there, certain Mr. Tobin's books, just to sort of get a bit of a flavour. Thought it was slightly bonkers, and it did perturb me slightly, but it also intrigued me. And I think the more technical research that I did, and loads of other companies' websites have got some quite great technical detail, made me think, you know what, this is just a bunch of stuff that I'm used to dealing with, and nothing like aircraft, of course, but very like critical infrastructure that I've handled for years and years.
Cool.
So, yeah.
You're dealing with the same thing. You're really dealing with the same thing. Critical infrastructure. So data center is a fourth utility, maybe not the same as aviation, but you know what, equally as, I guess, safety rich and making sure things happen at the right time. Pretty critical, I would say.
Well, and the other nice thing, this will sound bad, it's not meant to, but the customers are other companies rather than actual people. So things like at the airport and at theme parks, customers, literally thousands of people getting angry because something isn't working, isn't great. And it doesn't help you to create the time and space to get it corrected in an effective way. It's really, really super high pressure. Whereas in this critical infrastructure, although it's super high pressure, you've just got the singular customer, the team that you're working towards, rather than tens of thousands of angry people getting angrier by the second. So it's kind of nice.
I think I'm hearing what you're saying. I like the funneled down version of who that customer actually is. Hey, you supported us at the recent Innovation Summit, and we know there's a multitude of different challenges for this industry. And you talked about the wicked problem the industry has right now. And tell me a bit more about that. What does that mean?
Yeah, so a wicked problem was a phrase that was coined back in the 70s in the UK to do with sort of social issues where there wasn't enough housing, there wasn't enough money, people didn't have work, etc. So that there was so many dimensions to this problem that it was almost unsolvable. And they sort of opined that there were only a few ways out of a wicked problem. The first one was to regulate, so to come down hard on the rules, and for somebody, central government, whoever it is, to define the way forward out of the problem. The second way was to compete, so to get everybody running around fighting against each other for them to come up with the pathway out of a problem. And the third way, and the final way, my preferred way, is to collaborate. And I think that sort of framing of a wicked problem is exactly where we are in the data center industry currently, because demand is going through the roof. AI, further cloud extensions, etc., etc. We all know that story. Demand is way up there. We cannot build data centers quickly enough to meet that demand and to meet this great technical future that we all have. However, on the flip side, supply chain is constrained. So we don't have enough of the things that we need, whether it's concrete, whether it's steel, or long lead equipment. So your generators, your chillers, etc. That's in tight demand. So supply chain's constrained. land is difficult to find that you can get planning on to build a data center because nobody wants it near them. And power is slightly different depending on where in the world you are. But if I look at the UK or Dublin, for example, the power is significantly constrained. You cannot get the grid connections. You cannot get the power that you need. So with all of the, and sorry, that's before we even get to the skills, of course, skills and talent. We need hundreds of thousands of people to fill the industry. They're not coming from anywhere at the moment. So with all of these dimensions to this problem, I think the only way to move forward and to build at the scale and the pace that we need is for us all to collaborate.
I like that. And what does collaboration mean to you? How does that? What does that look like? In a good example, what do you think that could be, and who should be involved in that collaboration?
So I think if you take the large tech companies, they have significant buying power, and they know the demand that they want. So they could help the smaller companies like us who help to provide some of that critical infrastructure for them to work with the supply chain, to give the supply chain certainty and clarity. So rather than 10 different companies like me going to companies like you and going, hey, I need some XYZs, chillers or whatever, and you thinking that you've got 10 orders coming in when actually it's only one order because we're all competing for the same thing with one of our customers, actually providing that forward clarity might then help us all to work together to give you certainty and clarity to make sure we get the equipment we need delivered. Another way might be if one group of people have found some land that's good for use, another group of people have got some power, then maybe you can work together. I don't know. There's lots of ways to think through how we can work together as an industry rather than competing against each other, or even worse, turning up badly and making people regulate us. So if we're not collaborating well, if we're not providing the infrastructure that's needed, working with the population where our data centers need to live, then we're not going to be a trusted neighbour, and we're not going to be able to build anymore. I
think there's some really valid points in the middle of that. Collaboration is king on these topics, isn't it? Especially when I think about, I think you alluded to a couple of points there, but I just want to bring up the topic of sustainability, and I think that's a common piece for us and common issue for us to solve, and no better example of where we could collaborate really tightly to try and solve some of these problems, right?
Yeah. And thinking through how we can create landscapes where we can help the world that we're living in to survive better. So the data center is actually data centers for good. It's part of the solution than part of the problem, because the general populace wants the great stuff that data centers bring them. They're enjoying the availability of all of the apps they've got on their iPhone, their banking, they're watching Netflix or whatever it is. They're enjoying all of that. They don't want to step back from that, but they also don't want the planet to be ruined at the same time. They don't know how, the individual user doesn't know how to help to solve for that. We need to work together to help them to solve for it. Yeah,
and I think there's a few changes coming, isn't there? And we're right in the middle of a critical one now, which is the topic of AI, of course, and the demand change and the stresses maybe that's putting on us. But what do you see the industry? Do you see any change just yet around AI? Is it something that you've seen a material change in, or when do you anticipate that change to really come to the forefront?
So I've seen a demand change. So the scale of the data centers that we're now looking at, before I joined the industry, sort of 5 megawatts was big. As I joined the industry, 20 was sort of pretty standard, moving up to maybe 50 or 100 or a gigawatt campus now. So the scale of what we're being asked to build is bigger, because the density in the GPUs is that they require more power, so the density needs to increase, so the power load needs to increase. And if you're putting all of that compute power together to create a large language model, for example, it needs to be at scale. So that we're already seeing that demand side increase. We are also seeing some sort of slightly emergent sort of organic growth where AI overlays are being put onto normal sort of cloud infrastructure.
Okay.
So there is a little bit of organic growth as well. But so demand is exponentially increasing compared to sort of previous thinking and previous forecasts.
Are we on a trajectory of like superstardom with this? Is this going to last forever, or do you see a point when ultimately it will level off at some point, or am I talking about a unicorn that doesn't exist?
So I don't think it's a unicorn, but I do think there is a race. There's a little bit of an arms race on at the moment, and multiple companies are competing to win or to be the leader in that arms race. And so I do think there is some potential double counting or treble counting, but maybe within that demand curve where at some point there will be a winner and not quite so much winner or a runner-up, and so some of that demand might diminish. So I can see there being sort of a little bit of a tsunami and then a fall off. But I think what will naturally happen is even if there is a slight fall off in the demand, it will fall off to a higher base level. And then it might then surge again as new applications are found or as AI growth increases because applications get improved or applied for different use cases. So I can see there being a little bit of a roller coaster, to go back to some of my past, sort of ride along the way.
I like the link in that one. Nice. We see we talked about energy, and there is a real dynamic shift in this space. And the data center industry hasn't always got best press around this. How do we? And we talked about collaboration as well. Actually, how do we move ourselves forward? And I talk about this from a PR perspective. Maybe it's the wrong language. I don't know. But how do we support the kind of communities that we live in to better understand what it is we're doing and why we're doing it and how it impacts their daily lives? And actually, I think to your point, data centers for good, the impact it can have is and will have on really solving some of the biggest challenges on the planet.
I think opening up our doors, not literally, because clearly there's security challenges, but being open to working more closely with the community. So if there's a proposal for somewhere that we want a data center, then speaking more openly to the local community to understand what some of their challenges are and what might help them. So it could be district heating, it could be there's some new housing developments, social housing developments going in or something, and district heating would be super useful for that. So that's something that makes it really good for the community, because they can see that there's a benefit to them, as well as having jobs for the local community and also some educational pieces. So we have schools come into our campus. We talk about how data centers work. We talk about technical careers. We talk about broader engineering. And so we do quite a few schools events. So it just gives an overall benefit to the local community that is tangible for them.
I think these are fascinating things, right? Because I think what you're saying there is go and listen, go and talk, go and ask great questions. And we will find out, I think, as an industry, what really matters to individuals and communities that are wrapped around some of our data centers. How do we dispelling myths around data centers is probably something that needs a bit more broader attention. So really fascinating to hear what you're doing in the community. But what can we do to kind of like put a poster on the wall that says this is what happens and this is why?
Yeah, and so I think there's quite a lot of bad press linked with very old design and understanding of data centers. So, water consumption, for example,
right.
No modern data centers, particularly in the UK that I'm aware of, use water as a free-flowing coolant. They're all closed-loop systems. So there isn't this significant water usage that everybody's concerned about. Power consumption, we already have, we have standby generators, but they're fueled by HVO, vegetable oil, basically, which it is a renewable form, or at least a bioform of energy and fuel. We link into renewable sources of energy. So our customers will have power purchase agreements to get renewable sources. We're always thinking about how we can then improve that. So what else can we do to make sure that the data centers are as sustainable as possible? So looking at new materials, working on carbon sequestering concrete, also working on other forms of carbon sequestration. So at Pure, we're looking to create the equivalent of what I think of as carbon insets rather than carbon offsets. So there's always going to be an element of a carbon footprint, no matter what fantastic materials you use. And by the way, things like carbon sequestering concrete isn't widely available at the scale needed to build the data centers to meet the current demand profile. So there's going to be a carbon footprint, but what you do about that is the important thing. You can't wish it away, but what you can do is create more good than the carbon footprint that you've had to have for the data center needed. So we have biochar that we're doing a significant amount of research in. We were the biochar partner for COP28, which is a bit weird for a data center, but biochar sequesters a significant amount of carbon. And for people who don't understand what it is, it's like a form of charcoal, but you take some organic matter and you pyrolyze it, so you burn in the absence of oxygen. That sequesters a significant amount of carbon. So we'll be able to create biochar to sequester more carbon than the carbon footprint of the data center that we're building, for example. So creating some sort of, some way of being able to point to evidence that proves that you're doing more good than harm.
Let me take you back to a comment a few moments ago where we started to talk about people, talent, attracting people into this industry, because all of the things that we've just spoken about, there's two challenges. One is getting stuff done. I mean, that's a pretty important piece. And the second area there is clever folk who have the same passion and beliefs as those of us who are trying to make influential change in the industry. And one of the biggest challenges I think we have is attracting talent, whether that be early talent, ex-military, whoever it is. I think if you're old enough, you're good enough. Where do we fix this?
So I chair the Infrastructure Nation's D&I committee, or inclusion committee, as we've sort of call it now. And this is because I think there are two elements to this. There's attracting young people and helping them to see that this could be a great career for them. And so a lot of that is about the demystification and the myth busting. So better explaining what a data center was. I've been an engineer for several decades, more decades than I'd like to say. And although I knew what a server room was, I'd never actually heard of a data center. I didn't realize that there was this physical manifestation of the cloud. I mean, you think about it, of course, it's obvious, but I just hadn't taken the time to think about it. And as a professional engineer, if I hadn't taken the time to think about it, how on earth can we expect young people who are going through the education system, who've got all of this other stuff to think about, to be thinking about this and going, oh, that's a career that I might like? Career advice, particularly in this country, is shocking. So we need to plug that gap. We need to help to provide the career advice. If you go to a school or a higher education college or a university and you start to offer them things and go and do talks, or offer them some material so that they can help their career advisory, they'll bite your hand off. It will be the best thing for them, because the thing that industry doesn't do really, really well, and this is just generic industry, is provide the career advisory to the young people who are going through school and college. So all they will be doing is looking at what I call their career capital. So the people who are around them and thinking what they do, so what their dad does, or their sister or their uncle, their cousin. That will be their view of what work is. They won't know anything beyond that. So if none of their immediate family or friends are involved in the data center industry, they won't have a clue. So we need to help to plug that gap. And that will then help to maybe fuel a little bit of enthusiasm in joining the industry. We also need to broaden our pool, because currently, we even in the adverts and things that we run to attract talent into the industry, I don't think we're casting the net wide enough. So we're going to more traditional places to look for people. So maybe taking them from other companies. I might take some of your engineers if I've got a job and they quite fancy a promotion or something they're not getting internally. So we steal off of each other, which is it's kind of nice to help people get a career path, but it doesn't broaden the pool. We don't look outside the industry with maybe transferers from other industries that might be on the demise, or people who haven't even who might have a technical background or be interested in the industry, because you don't need to be an engineer to be in the industry. You can do anything. So we need to broaden the pool out. We need to fish far more widely, and we need to be open to hiring for the person rather than hiring for the specific qualification or specific experiential background. So if you have great people, if they've got the right attitude, you can teach them the skills they need. There are very few jobs, maybe a senior authorized person, where you have to have very specific, for safety reasons, very specific skill sets and experience and education. There are very few things that cannot be trained.
Yeah, this is a really good point I want to pick up on the last bit there, because I've had my mindset changed in the last 2 or 3 years, especially on this topic around CVs. So I look at a CV now. Am I interested in the degree? I'm moderately interested in the degree. It shows a level of capability of understanding and learning, but what I'm really interested in is the person going to fit into the team, and does that person bring something to the team? Is that on us as leaders to try and give build that culture that's visible to the outside world, so that people can sense, actually, I can play a role in there, and even though I've taken French politics as my degree, I can actually play a role within this group somewhere. Is that how you see it?
That is absolutely how I see it. I mean, there will always be some very specific technical things that you need to have done a degree for. So, architecture, for example, or engineering design. But within the actual data center companies, you don't have those people, you tend to get consultants in to do that.
Right.
So there are very few jobs that cannot be trained. So even if I take my on-site engineers, we have apprenticeship schemes which can take somebody. And one of my favourite examples is in London. One of the we had a team of cleaners, and one of them aspired to become an engineer and actually became one of our sort of maybe slightly later in life apprentices to basically turn his hand to something that he saw and thought, what, I'd love to give that a go. And he was turning up, he was the cleaner. So, hugely aspirational, and just proves that you can go into some form of training and experience on the job that will help you to get the skill set that you need. So yes, I absolutely advocate in hiring for the person. I say there are a few very limited roles that you need a really specific educational background on for safety and compliance reasons. A lot of those are consultants that we hire in anyway, rather than people that we employ in our data center company.
This is a fascinating conversation. I think we've probably all got a few stories of people that you've seen floating around your organisation. You think, actually, you could do a really nice role for us over here. I feel that, and again, non-specific from a technical standpoint. So, very interesting. But should we bother doing this, though? I mean, if we're just stealing from each other, do we really need to do it? And what benefit could it bring if we start to really pay lots of attention? So let's say you and I go on a mass campaign around the country with 30 of our peers to kind of drum up interest in this industry. Should we bother, or is it interesting for early talents? Is this a world of high excitement? What would be our pitch?
Absolutely, it's a world of high excitement, and I think the fact that there are so many complex problems to solve. So back to my wicked problem, the industry is not only buoyant, but it's hugely challenged as well. And people like solving problems. It's exciting, it's interesting, and we have a great bunch of other businesses that we work with. So even the inter-business relationships are interesting, they're intriguing. There's also the sort of the link with both the public and also with regulatory bodies and governments. Because we are the fourth utility, this is being talked about at a government level in multiple countries and jurisdictions around the globe. In fact, every jurisdiction around the globe, I would suggest. So literally, the data center industry has every single aspect that might be intriguing or interesting, I think. Whether you're into sort of, human behaviors, whether you're into politics, whether you're into, regulation and how countries work, or if you're into just tech, any of those things, or sustainability, helping to solve there are all these problems to solve. And so, literally all comers. The other really important point is, yes, we could continue just stealing from each other, but there aren't enough people. And the workforce is greying out because of the age of this industry. It goes back a few decades. Actually, all the people that came into it at that sort of time were probably mid-30s or whatever. Then they're now starting to retire. So not only is there this gap from the people retiring from the industry, there's also the growth of the industry, which is creating a hundreds of thousands of roles a year gap. So we need more people to come in. We can't just live with what we have. We also need to make sure that in bringing those people in, once we have them, we need to make them stay because we're not as inclusive as we could be. Lots of companies are trying very hard. We're not getting it right yet. And so, an inclusive workplace isn't just great for this, great wider pool of talent that we've hired. It's good for everybody. Everybody benefits. This isn't discriminatory against anybody. That's the whole point. It makes life better for everybody, their work life better. So I can't understand why not every single person would be advocating for an inclusive workplace.
Well, we're definitely on the same page on that one. I can guarantee you that. And I was only talking just yesterday, actually, about the importance of a diverse team. And diverse can mean many, many different things, of course. And I was trying to articulate how diversity of thinking is actually the most important thing. So background, ethnicity, male, female. There are so many different swings to this that actually I said I was really proud of the team that I'd built because, we robustly challenge some of the hot topics and we robustly challenge them because we all have a different view. Now, on occasions, maybe there's a little bit of positive friction around some of the discussions we have, but actually robustly challenging and not being afraid to do that is quite a powerful tool and helps you progress your business at a far faster rate. So I'm really interested to hear this topic. I think could carry on for quite some time, but I want to move us on to iMasons. Okay, so the most recent report. and they talk about clean energy zones. So towns planned everywhere. So we're going to think about where the energy supply is, where we're going to be doing that locally, and drop in the centres in the middle of an epicenter, if you like. Could that be one of the solutions, do you think?
Absolutely, it could. It would have to be quite location specific, because there won't be everywhere in the world where you could create a new sort of green zone and have it all planned out from the get-go, because it takes quite a lot of space. Okay, so but in every single country, I think there are challenges where more housing is needed, where the electricity transmission and distribution network needs to be expanded, where you might need some more renewable energies put in. The housing is needed. If we've got some district heating in there, wouldn't that be great? And some other broader infrastructure. It's all needed. So actually, if all of those things are needed, why wouldn't you put it together and plan it from the start so it could be absolutely sustainable? It could have been put together in a really thoughtful way, so it creates a fantastic space for living, for having all of the utilities and the services that you need. The road planning would have been done right, etc. So that there are a lot of merits for it. I think its application in totality will be very location specific. But if you think about the UK, as towns are expanding and every single local planning authority is being challenged to create so many extra housing and social housing and so on, if they're planning that and their infrastructure doesn't quite suit either, so they haven't got enough power, they haven't got enough water, etc., well, why wouldn't you maybe take a little bit of a stand back moment and go, actually, we could get some other technical infrastructure in here too.
Right.
It kind of would make sense. Yeah, it doesn't mean that everybody will go running around and doing that. It might work better in larger countries where they have more open space and they're trying to expand at a faster rate in those localities.
Well, maybe that's a good point, because our friends in the Nordics seem to do a really good job at this.
Yes.
Especially, Finland, those that are further north, I would say, do a pretty good job on it. And I was going to ask you a question, actually, just while you're on this topic, on planning, consent, and the way that we think about doing this, because you're right, aren't you? The nature of our country is quite confined and quite condensed, really. So it would require some quite clever planning and thinking. On the topic of collaboration, do you think that whole cycle is completely collaborative at this moment in time, or does it need a bit of a tweak?
It definitely needs a bit of a tweak. The planning cycle is currently too long and too troublesome, and it sort of, there's no clear path or even clear time frame around it. So I think that needs to be remedied and fixed. I also think that the sort of a fail fast sort of methodology might be better, sort of thinking harder and sharper about it, rather than having multiple years of people spending an awful lot of time trying to get a particular campus over the line in terms of planning, if actually it's always doomed to failure. If that's never going to happen, then we ought to fail fast and move on and focus on areas where we can work with the planning authorities to create maybe some smaller element of this new energy zone. Or actually, they want a data center because they've got some land which would be really good use for data centers, because it's currently scrubland, or it had other industrial buildings on it that are now sort of in dilapidated states or whatever. So thinking a little bit longer and harder at the front end to then go, let's come to decisions, rather than this sort of creeping death, hoping to get stuff over the line that then never quite manages to stumble over the line.
Creeping death. That's one I'm going to think about for a little while. Let's think about this then. So you've got one message you can leave the industry, and when it comes to the future of our, energy and this digital infrastructure, what is that one message you'd like to leave?
We're so privileged. We've got such a great industry. We need to work together to make sure that it meets the potential and also meets everybody's desires and aspirations for the future.
I like that. So we've talked about a whole host of things today, haven't we? We've talked about availability of power. We've talked about, how do we build them? Where do we build them? We've talked about the talent, the gaps, how we're going to fulfill them. I've really enjoyed our discussion. So thank you for joining me today, Dawn, and appreciate all your insights. Thank you.
My pleasure.